The story of India is one of the oldest on Earth, a land of ancient cities, sacred rivers, and civilizations that stretch back thousands of years. A place where history is not just written in books, but carved into temples, whispered in languages, and passed through generations. But beneath all of that, beneath the monuments, the myths, and the identities, there is something far more powerful, something invisible, something undeniable: DNA. In recent years, scientists have begun decoding the genetic history of millions of people across the Indian subcontinent, not through legends, not through politics, but through the biological record written inside every human cell. And what they found was not what many expected, because the story told by DNA does not fully match the story many have been taught. It reveals movements of people across vast distances, encounters between entirely different populations, ancient mixtures, forgotten migrations, and origins far more complex than any single narrative. For decades, sometimes centuries, certain ideas about identity, ancestry, and origin have been repeated as unquestioned truth. But what happens when science begins to challenge those ideas? What happens when the genetic evidence tells a different story, a story that is deeper, older, and far more interconnected? This is not just a scientific discovery, it is a mystery, a controversy, and for some, an uncomfortable truth. Because if DNA is the ultimate record of human history, then what it reveals about India changes everything. Tonight, we uncover the hidden genetic story of one of the world's most ancient civilizations. Not the story written in textbooks, but the one written in blood. This is India's DNA lie exposed, the hidden truth. For generations, the story of India's origins has been told in a relatively simple way: a continuous civilization, a people deeply rooted in the same land for thousands of years, an unbroken chain stretching from the earliest settlements to the modern nation. From the ancient cities of the Indus Valley to the rise of powerful kingdoms, to the vast cultural and linguistic diversity seen today, the narrative has often suggested continuity, stability, and deep, singular roots. At the heart of this story lies one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history, the Indus Valley Civilization. Flourishing more than 4,000 years ago, it was one of the world's earliest urban societies. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were built with remarkable planning, grid systems, advanced drainage, standardized bricks. It was sophisticated, organized, mysterious, and for a long time, many believed this civilization represented the direct ancestors of modern populations across much of India. A foundation, a beginning, but there was always something missing. Unlike other ancient civilizations, the Indus script has never been fully deciphered. We don't know their language. We don't know exactly who they were or where they came from. And then there is another layer to the story, one that has shaped identities, debates, and even politics for decades: the idea of ancient migrations. Some theories suggest that groups of people moved into the Indian subcontinent thousands of years ago, bringing with them new languages, cultural practices, and technologies. Others strongly reject this idea, arguing for complete indigenous continuity. For years, this debate has been framed as a choice between two opposing narratives. Either the people of India originated entirely within the subcontinent, or they were significantly shaped by incoming populations from elsewhere. It became more than just a question of history. It became a question of identity, of belonging, of origin. And in many ways, both sides relied on fragments: archaeology, linguistics, and historical interpretation. But all of these methods share one limitation: they are indirect. They leave room for interpretation, for bias, for uncertainty. And that is where DNA changes everything. Because DNA does not rely on interpretation in the same way. It carries within it a record of ancestry, one that cannot easily be rewritten. And when scientists began analyzing genetic data
across the Indian subcontinent. They weren't looking to confirm beliefs, they were looking for patterns. What they discovered would challenge the simplicity of the old story, not by replacing it entirely, but by revealing something far more complex beneath it. A story not of a single origin, but of many. A story not of isolation, but of connection. And a story that had been hidden in plain sight, inside the DNA of millions. For most of human history, the past was reconstructed through fragments. Ruins buried beneath the earth, ancient tools, written records if they survived at all. But DNA changed that, because unlike artifacts, DNA does not lie dormant in the ground alone. It lives within us. Every person carries a genetic archive, a record of their ancestors, encoded across generations. And in the late 19th and early 21st centuries, advances in genetic science made it possible to read that archive with unprecedented precision. At first, the studies were small, limited samples, basic comparisons. But as technology improved, something remarkable happened. Researchers began collecting data samples from thousands, then tens of thousands of individuals across the Indian subcontinent. Different regions, different languages, different communities. And when they began analyzing this data, patterns started to emerge. Clear patterns, not random, not chaotic, structured, consistent, and impossible to ignore. One of the earliest and most striking findings was this: the genetic makeup of people across India was not uniform, not even close. Instead, it showed evidence of deep ancestral mixing between distinct populations. Geneticists began identifying broad ancestral components, genetic signatures that appeared again and again in varying proportions across different groups. These components suggested that the people of India today are the result of ancient blending. But blending of whom? That question would lead to one of the most important breakthroughs in understanding the region's genetic history. Researchers discovered evidence pointing to at least two major ancestral lineages. One lineage appeared to be connected to ancient populations that had long existed within the subcontinent.
Deeply rooted, ancient, local. The other lineage showed genetic links to populations outside of India, particularly groups connected to regions further northwest. This was not speculation. It was measurable, visible in the DNA itself, markers that could be traced, compared, and analyzed across populations. And the deeper scientists looked, the clearer it became. These lineages did not remain separate. They mixed extensively over long periods of time, across regions, across communities. The result was not replacement, but combination, a merging of ancestries that created the genetic landscape seen today. And this is where the story begins to shift, because the old narrative of a single, continuous, unbroken origin could no longer fully explain what the DNA was revealing. Instead, the evidence pointed to movement, interaction, migration, not in a simple one-time event, but in waves, gradual, complex, layered over thousands of years. And perhaps most surprising of all, these patterns were not limited to one region or one group. They appeared across the entire subcontinent, from north to south, from east to west. Different proportions, different timelines, but the same underlying story. India's population was shaped not by isolation, but by connection, by encounters between different peoples, by journeys that left traces not in written history, but in genetic code. And yet, even as this evidence grew stronger, it raised more questions than answers. Who were these ancient populations? When did they meet? What caused them to mix? And perhaps most importantly, why did this story remain so hidden for so long? The DNA evidence was clear. India's genetic history was not static. It was a tapestry, woven with threads from many distant places and times. And yet, for decades, much of this story remained hidden, misunderstood, or deliberately ignored. Because the patterns in the DNA hinted at something controversial. Ancient migrations, groups of people moving across vast distances, settling in new lands, and mixing with populations already there. Some of these movements were relatively recent, others date back tens of thousands of years, long before written history, long before kingdoms and empires. One of the most debated migrations involves groups coming from regions northwest of India. Archaeology had hinted at these connections before. Artifacts, pottery styles, and linguistic clues suggested links between South Asia and Central Asia, but DNA provided the proof. It revealed that waves of people arrived in India carrying not just culture, but also new genetic lineages. Some came from the steppes of Central Asia, others from ancient Iranian farming communities, each wave leaving a lasting imprint on the local population. But the mixing was never uniform. In some regions, the newcomers contributed heavily to the gene pool. In others, the influence was smaller, but still detectable. And it was not a simple story of invasion. This was gradual integration, marriage, families, communities blending over generations. Yet, despite the evidence, these findings have often been downplayed or disputed in popular narratives. Why? Because the story told by DNA challenges deeply held beliefs about identity, ancestry, and purity. It does not align with the image of a singular, uninterrupted lineage. It reveals that India's population is the product of both ancient indigenous roots and external influences. Even more strikingly, DNA also revealed migrations that were entirely unexpected. Small groups, long forgotten, that traveled incredible distances, some leaving only subtle traces in modern populations, others contributing disproportionately to the genetic makeup of large regions. And within this evidence, there were patterns that seemed almost poetic. Populations separated by thousands of kilometers sometimes shared surprisingly similar genetic markers, indicating that human movement, even in prehistory, was far more dynamic than previously imagined. It is here that the controversy deepens. For decades, history was taught as a story of continuity, of local purity, of isolated development. But genetics shows something different, a story of movement, of interaction, of mixing across borders that did not yet exist, of a world far more interconnected than anyone had realized. And yet, despite these revelations, the DNA lie, as some call it, remains pervasive, because acknowledging it would mean rethinking much of what we believe about origin, identity, and heritage. It is a truth that challenges comfort, a truth that questions certainty, a truth that is written not in textbooks, but in our very cells. Science, as powerful as it is, rarely exists in isolation. The discoveries hidden in India's DNA were not just academic findings, they touched something far deeper: identity. For centuries, ideas about ancestry, origin, and purity have shaped societies. They have defined caste, class, and community. They have influenced politics, religion, and culture. And now, DNA was telling a story that challenged many of those assumptions. It revealed a past not of singular isolated communities, but of constant movement, mixing, and integration. A past that does not fit neatly into modern categories. For some, this was liberating. It suggested unity. It suggested shared ancestry across regions, languages, and communities. It painted a picture of India as a living mosaic, connected to the wider world in ways that were previously unrecognized. But for others, the revelations were unsettling. How could deeply held beliefs about origins be reconciled with genetic evidence of migration? How could ideas of purity withstand a history written in DNA? And how could history as it was taught, carefully curated over generations, face the stark empirical proof that human movement and mixing were constants, not exceptions? Debates erupted in academic journals, on television, and increasingly in the public sphere. Politicians, historians, and religious leaders weighed in. Some welcomed the findings as a chance to embrace a more nuanced understanding of identity. Others criticized the research as undermining culture and tradition. The controversy even extended into schools and universities. Textbooks, curricula, and public narratives often lag behind scientific discovery. Generations were taught a story of continuity, unbroken, simple, and reassuring. And suddenly, DNA was rewriting that story, piece by piece. In some cases, scientists themselves were targeted, their findings labeled provocative or politically sensitive. Yet the data remained undeniable. Because DNA cannot be silenced. Markers, sequences, and genetic signatures speak louder than opinion. They record the truth of migration, mixture, and ancestry, regardless of convenience, belief, or ideology. And the more data accumulated, the more obvious it became. India's story is not a single narrative. It is a layered, complex, and often surprising tapestry. A story shaped by countless generations, by arrivals and departures, by encounters both fleeting and profound. And in that complexity lies the very essence of the DNA lie.